I'm joined now by the U.S. Senator from California, Alex Padilla. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, thank you for having me.
So I want to go over a little bit of the situation that occurred in the last 24 hours where you were assaulted and attempted to be detained, arrested by members of the Trump administration for attempting to ask Kristi Noem, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, a question during a press conference. First and foremost, there is this lie spreading across right-wing media that you failed to identify yourself. I mean, we've played the video dozens of times. I'll put the video right here up on the screen.
I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions for the Secretary because the fact of the matter is a half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your hands off.
How many of our ICE agents have been docked?
On the ground. Hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
If you let my hands go, I put them behind my back.
All right. Cool. Other hand. Lay flat. Lay flat.
Other hand, sir. Other hand.
And so clearly you can see from that video that you identified yourself. And so what did you take away from the fact that these folks are looking for some justification to try and attack you? And so the route they're taking is to just lie so brazenly, even about something that's caught right there on camera.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to sort of set the record straight and clarify their lies. I was a little surprised, but not shocked, because it is part of the Trump administration DNA to lie, to mislead, to misinform, to disinform. So the fact of the matter is, look, I did not barge in, right? That's been one of their other lies, that I barged into the conference room and that I lunged at the secretary. Nothing could be further from the truth. Here's the real context. This whole press conference took event in a federal building in Los Angeles. I happened to be there at the same time, awaiting a scheduled briefing with members of Northern Command, right? Because the administration has been non-responsive to our questions since January 20th on a whole lot of issues, but particularly this last week with their escalation in Los Angeles, the unnecessary federalization of National Guard troops, the deployment of National Guard women and men to Los Angeles. And as the week has gone on, with local law enforcement making progress on the challenges in Los Angeles, Trump is escalating with now saying they're sending in the Marines. And so I finally scheduled a briefing with representatives of Northern Command. I'm there on time in a conference room when I catch wind that Secretary Noem is there, literally a couple of doors down the hall. You can't make this stuff.
Yeah.
And so now my briefing is delayed because some of the folks that were there to brief me are now in that press conference. So I ask the folks who are escorting me, because like any federal building, you go through security, and even a U.S. senator is subject to escort, in this case, a member of the National Guard and an FBI agent. Clearly, they know who I am because their job is to be with me the entire time. I ask, hey, can we go over and listen to the press conference? They escort me over. They open the door for me. And so I walk in. The whole press corps knows who I am because it's Los Angeles. I'm sitting quietly in the side of the room, sort of behind the camera. I don't want to sort of be in the way of any reporters. And I'm there for a few minutes. And the folks that escorted me in are literally there, not too far from me. And you hear just Noem and the rhetoric and the BS that they continue to spew. And not even the first time I bit my lip, but the second time she goes on and on about the Trump administration needing to liberate the people of Los Angeles from the governor and from the mayor, et cetera. Yeah. That was just too much. And at that moment, I felt I needed to speak up because there's been questions and requests for information that they've been non-responsive to. And I'm doing my job as a senator, right? Since when is it wrong for a U.S. senator to ask a question of a cabinet secretary? That's all I was doing. But within a second, there was multiple agents on me, hands on me, and you've seen the video. You've seen the rest.
So I want to dig into that a little bit. Like this is all predicated on this idea that the Trump administration is going to come in and relieve us of this invasion of hardened criminals. That's the rhetoric that they kept surfacing, especially as Donald Trump was a candidate and in the beginning of his administration. We're seeing now that as they're targeting folks who are on work sites, whether it's on construction construction sites. They're targeting folks in the fields, picking the food that not only Californians, but everybody across this country eats, that it's not exactly hardened criminals as they promised. And so can I have your reaction to the fact that the folks who believe Donald Trump amid his promises of these mass deportation efforts, as it was focused on hardened criminals, got sold a bill of goods because that isn't at all what's happening right now?
Exactly. And so you're touching on two of my key points from yesterday. Number one, the question I was trying to ask is, what about everybody else? Because they'll put out generic stats, maybe that there's been dozens or hundreds, however many people they think they have detained, and maybe there's due process, maybe not. But the names that they were listing at this press conference was only maybe a half dozen. And so what about all the cooks, all the farm workers, all the car wash workers, all the others,
Right.
non-violent migrants? That was one of the issues I was trying to point out when all this happened, because the claims of only targeting dangerous, violent criminals has been a lie. It's been a lie. And so many of the other people that have been caught up in their increasingly extreme, theatrical, cruel enforcement actions are otherwise hardworking people that are contributing to our economy. And we should definitely talk about that. So that's number one. Because they're not transparent with the data, I wanted to ask that question. But you give the example of all these folks in key industries, right? In the food supply chain, in hospitality, in healthcare, in construction. What they did when I had the audacity to ask a question, imagine what they could do, imagine what they are doing to a lot of folks who may not feel free to speak up or may have a question and there's not cameras there to capture how they may or may not be treated. That's the big takeaway. This should be a wake-up call for everybody across the country. If this can happen to United States Senator, not just on the issue of trying to defend due process and maybe immigrants' rights, but anybody who disagrees with them on reproductive rights, on marriage equality, on whether or not climate change is real, or the need to maintain a federal government and a social safety net. Look what they're doing with the big budget bill that House Republicans voted out happily, and now Senate Republicans are trying to move quickly on it, gutting the healthcare system, impacting Social Security, housing, and more. So this crisis that's been manufactured in Los Angeles has also been a distraction tool, which the Trump administration is very, very good at. Let's get everybody talking about Los Angeles and what's happening in a very small portion of downtown to take attention away from the budget, from Russia, Ukraine, from the breakup with Elon Musk, and more.
And I think it's also worth noting, too, just on the broader economic implications, we are right now the only country in the industrialized world that's seeing an economic contraction. All of these other neighboring countries, all of our other industrialized countries in the West, in Europe, whatever it may be, are seeing economic growth. They're seeing GDP growth. We're contracting. And yet at the same time that we're contracting, one might think that it might not be a prudent idea to then eliminate, cut off the lifelines of these key industries that would drive further growth. What's going to happen if all of a sudden you have nobody who's willing to show up to work in hospitality, in construction, in agriculture, because they're afraid of what might happen when they get plucked out of their jobs by Kristi Noem and ICE. And so these sectors continue to contract at a time when that's the last thing that we need.
Yeah, the contrast is just too clear, right?
Right.
The 4 years of the Biden administration was job creation, economic growth, job creation, economic growth. Trump comes in, this foolish, ill-conceived, unnecessary tariff war. And then we see the economic implications of those threats to on and off again tariffs, to tariffs that are sticking, et cetera. And you're seeing the economic contraction that you're talking about. But speaking of the economy, for all the righteous and moral arguments I can make about better treatment for immigrants and pathway to citizenship for dreamers and on and on and on, there's also an economic one. And California is Exhibit A. California is not just the most populous state in the nation, the most diverse state in the nation, home to more immigrants than any state in the nation. Immigrants that contribute so much because California is now the fourth largest economy in the world, right? The largest economy of any state in the nation by far, not despite its immigrant population, but because of immigrant contributions as workers, as consumers, as entrepreneurs. That should be embraced, not attacked.
Right. I do want to note that in the immediate aftermath of this whole event taking place, where you were tackled by these officials in the Trump administration, Mike Johnson had the opportunity to respond and protect or defend the autonomy of the legislative branch, which he's a part of, which you're a part of, as a co-equal branch of government. And yet his decision was to instead defer to the Trump administration, kind of contract all of his power over to the executive branch, as he so often does, and instead of defending your right to do your constitutional duty of oversight against the executive branch, he instead suggested that maybe a censure should be on the table at a bare minimum for you. So can I have your reaction to Mike Johnson siding not with his own branch of government, but instead the executive branch?
Yeah, beyond sad, certainly not shocking, and actually offensive, just as someone who takes their job seriously, right? To your point, we're a co-equal branch of government. Our job is oversight and accountability. And so that's all I was trying to do. If Kristi Noem or DHS will not genuinely answer questions in committee during hearings, if they won't to letters and inquiries by members of the Senate, but there's an opportunity for me to ask a question in person at a press conference in my home state, that's me doing my job. Mike Johnson and congressional Republicans may choose to not do their job, but they cannot stop me from doing mine.
All right, well, let's finish off with this. You are the latest in a long line of either Democratic officials or just officials who are doing their jobs. And I'm talking about, we had a Democratic lawmaker, we had a staffer for Jerry Nadler, a judge in Wisconsin, the mayor of Newark, all of whom have been either targeted or arrested by this administration. And so can I have your reaction to the increasingly autocratic tendencies of an administration that, let's be honest, if we saw this stuff happening in any other country in the world, we wouldn't think twice before calling it out for exactly what it is?
It's all the signs of an increasingly authoritarian form of government. It's a classic Donald Trump. So what he wants in an ideal world is for the rest of us to cower, for the rest of us to be silent and let him continue to overreach and abuse his power. That is not the American way. The American way is for righteous people, patriots who believe in our democracy, to stand up, to exercise our First Amendment rights, to speak up and defend our fundamental rights. And so that's what we will continue to do. There's a lot of folks organizing for No King's Day on Saturday to not just make the point, but a little bit of a counter to his vanity parade that's scheduled in Washington, D.C. I encourage people to peacefully protest, peacefully participate in No King's Day and any other day until we rein in this administration.
Well, Senator Padilla, thank you so much for speaking out, for taking the time today. I know that you're getting pulled in 100 different directions here, and thank you for pushing back against this administration and not sitting silently, but literally getting up and making sure that your voice was heard. So appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much.